So first of all, Philip, thank you very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here. And thank you, Marcus, for putting together such a very esteemed and very diverse group of people. I'm coming a little bit from a different angle. I'm coming from the industry. I'm an investor, and I'll tell you my bio in a moment. But I do want to say one thing, which is your fields, water, energy, have been long here. We've been using water for as long as we remember, energy for as long as we remember. Cybersecurity is a different topic. How old is cybersecurity? Anybody knows? How old is the industry? Don't be shy. I'm Israeli. We're not shy. 20 years? Okay. 50. Okay, so I mean, it really depends, right? In Switzerland, when I started my business 2016, nobody was talking about cybersecurity, right? It was IT security. It was a topic, for people in the basement somewhere. Nobody was talking about the connectivity. Cybersecurity could go anywhere from, the 1990s, where it was started to get used, to really back in really 50 years ago. So that is as far as it goes back. And imagine trying to regulate cybersecurity and to talk about it like in systems and regulations. And it's moving so fast. We all saw what happened with the ChatGPT moment, right? 2023, the AI came storming into our lives. How do you regulate that? How do you build cybersecurity around that? What is going to happen when the quantum moment will come? Quantum computers will break encryption. So we're kind of in an industry that is much younger, is less regulated, and we have to constantly innovate. And the hackers are moving faster than the defenders. So we really have a trouble, and I want you to think about it. And maybe one more question to you. Who is in charge of physical security, our physical security?
Police.
Police. Who else? The army, right. Who else? If you're a child walking in the street, crossing the street in Zurich, here in the Remistrasse. Okay, you could say everyone. That's physical security, right? Maybe the city, right? Who else is in charge of our physical security? Exactly. We have to take care of the parents. So it's a combination, right? I mean, we have to put locks in our houses. But who's in charge of our cybersecurity? I am in charge. Oh, I gave that would be great, by the way. That would be great. So cybersecurity, that's another thing we need to think about when we think about public services, right? So cybersecurity, it's a combination of, myself as an individual buying, an antivirus to my computer, protecting my computer. It's a combination of Swisscom, right, providing security to my networks so that my data doesn't leak. The government, when I vote, if you have the EID, has to secure that the users, the information is not stolen. So we have to think about all of these things, and with that, I do want to open a little bit. I'll tell you a word about myself. I served in the Israeli intelligence in the unit 8200 for 2 years. That's a technology unit of the intelligence. Afterwards, I did my undergrad at Harvard, and my MBA was already here in Switzerland in St. Gallen. I've been here for 15 years. And after a couple of corporate jobs, basically started a company that brings cybersecurity innovation to the market. So we started essentially selling cyber defense technologies to multinationals, companies like Nestle, Novartis, and others here in the market, and very quickly became an investor. Started investing into cybersecurity startups. I invested so far in 39 cybersecurity startups, and we exited 11. So I really look at the market from kind of the next generation perspective. So let's talk about cybersecurity in the public service. First of all, public service depend on digital systems, right? Our healthcare delivery, our tax collection, citizen registry, they're all interconnected. And this makes cyber incidents operational events and not technical events. Now, if you look at the World Economic Forum says that over 70% of governments globally have experienced a cyber security incident in public services last year. So we are in a troubled area. Public services are more exposed to cyber risk because they deliver essential functions. We talked about energy, we talked about water. What happens if there is a downtime on water delivery because of a cyber attack, or an energy delivery, or a blackout like we saw in Spain, which is coming from potentially a cyber attack? Or what if imagine a cyber attack on the SBB. I mean, what happens if hackers go and divert the trains, God forbid, or if a downtime happens because the SBB lines are down. So all of these things that are at the heart of the economy, we are highly reliant on the operations of the economy. The public service, they concentrate large volume of sensitive citizen data, right? So the public sector is among the top 3 most targeted sectors for cyber attack. And one of the big problems is that, in public services, they're quite old-fashioned. They have a lot of legacy systems, and these legacy systems create a very complex environment to protect. I mean, technology keeps evolving. These legacy systems get out of date, and how do you really protect them? So we see here, I would say, more questions than answers when it comes to really protecting public services. If we look at one of the incidents that happened in Switzerland in June 2025, the Swiss federal government experienced a ransom attack that came through a vendor that is called Radix, that essentially provided IT to multiple offices. And we saw data being stolen. We saw the data being published on the dark web. This is what we call this type of attack is called a supply chain attack, or a third-party risk type of attack. And we see this more and more happening, by the way, not just to public services, but also to companies, right, enterprises that are experiencing these third-party kind of attack that is coming through one of their vendors. This is a huge part of what we're trying to protect, is the third-party risk, and we have to think about it. So we talked about the third-party providers, right, that are part of the attack surface. We talked about data exposure, right? What happens when there is stolen public sector data? This data can be reused for identity fraud, for phishing, for attacks on citizens and institutions. And what about the impact that is amplified by the coordination and communication? So even those attacks that are contained have to be coordinated and through cross agencies. So, if I refer to your lecture, your presentation about water, or to your about energy, I mean, the complexity of the system is huge, but it really also is running very, very, very fast, and there's almost no time. There's almost no time to protect it, right? You constantly have to close one window that opens, right? The windows are constantly opening there. Cybersecurity, we call it a pillar of trust in the government. It's a pillar of trust in the digital economy, and we already understood that the digital public services, they depend on the citizen confidence, right? That cyber incidents that happen, they erode trust in the government. basically. And the trust that is lost in the system is asymmetric and long-lasting. Imagine what would happen if the Swiss elections were rigged because of a cyber attack. I mean, how would you trust the next elections that take place? Or if your data is stolen from the data center of the city of Zurich, how would you feel? How would you trust your municipality afterwards? So it's a lot. There's a lot of trust there that is concentrated in this area. So I think this conference is about resilience, right, Philip? I mean, I think you brilliantly brought together really a lot of fantastic speakers on the topic of resilience. And we have to shift from prevention, this idea of prevention in cybersecurity, to resilience. And the critical question is, not just how can we prevent them, but what happens when there is a cyber attack? How quickly can we recover, right? Because we cannot tolerate the downtime. The downtime can cost us many tens of millions or hundreds of millions, for example, with Merck Pharmaceuticals that went down in 2017. These things cost us a lot of money. And the question is, how do we recover from them as soon as possible? And this resilience frames cybersecurity as an operational capability. So we no longer live in a world where we can just say, oh, cybersecurity, we leave it to the experts. The world, it used to be like that when we weren't connected. If you want to plug yourself out of the internet, sure, don't think about cybersecurity. But as long as you're connected to the internet, you have to protect yourself. And so this is an operational topic. It's a topic of resilience. And it has to be constantly in the front of our minds. Because if we keep it in the back of our minds, and if we add cybersecurity later to the system, it would cost us much more than if we build cybersecurity inherently when we design the system. We call it security by design. We're talking about good cybersecurity for public services, so we need the leadership and accountability. We need security that is embedded in design and not added later. As I just said, we have to have people that are prepared and coordinated. And I think you mentioned very nicely the kind of the ecosystem coordination that is required for the public authority. We need here a combination of, people, so the citizens that report cyber incidents to, for example, the NCSC in Switzerland, as well as the government that is cooperating with other governments. Because what if one government knows in Germany, for example, that an attack is coming, but not warning Switzerland? So the exchange of information is extremely important in cybersecurity, and a lot of the regulation will also come around information exchange. We can talk about it later. We talked about cybersecurity. We believe that it has to be treated as critical infrastructure. Okay, because of the dependency we have on it, we have to move from reactive spending to investment, and we really have to measure the resilience. Cybersecurity, we have to move away from kind of check the box. Oh, I'm cyber secure, I checked the box, it's a compliance issue. We have to really create the preparedness, the response time, and the recovery, and not just constantly be checking the boxes. So I think this is about it for now. I hope it was fast enough, and happy to take the panel.